everybody. Hi. I think you're all muted, but you can chat to me at the bottom just with the chat button if you want. So lovely to see everybody. Hope you're all well. Hope you're having a nice bank holiday week. Are the kids back at school yet? I think it's been dragged out. There seems to be, oh, have you got yours back, Philippa? Brilliant. Seems to be getting later and later and later that they're going back to school. I'll just let a few more people in and then we will get going. Fabulous. Right. Yeah, I know some people have got it and some people are watching later. You will all get a recording of it, so I'll just edit it down and then send it to you probably later today or tomorrow morning, so you will have that recording for you to refer back to. Can you all hear me okay? Sound okay? Brilliant, fabulous, lovely. Let somebody else in. Good stuff. So yeah, so you will all have this recording. So you'll all get a recording of it, and that will have, I'll basically run through what we're going to do today. So the first half, I don't need to see you. It's lovely to see your faces, but if anybody is sat in the pajamas in bed and they want to turn the video off, that's absolutely fine. With the rollers in, as my mother used to do. So you can do that, or but it is nice to see you, but I don't need to see you. During the class aspect, I'm not going to be correcting you, I'm just giving you a class. Obviously, it's great that you're here because you can ask any questions as we're going through and I'll do my best to answer them. So the first part is going to be me talking to you and is going through some PowerPoint presentation. Just let some more in. So I'll go through the talking part first of all. I say you're welcome to take notes, but you are getting the recording as well, so it's entirely up to you. And then the second half is going to be a class. So it's going to be a class that's suitable for people with osteopenia and osteoporosis, because you guys probably have got quite a good idea of the contraindications. You're probably quite aware of those, but then it's like, well, I know what I can't do, but what can I do? What can I use with everybody? And that's the thing, isn't it? We want really to be able to give them something. Just admit everybody in. You know, give people things that they can actually do. I mean, that's the key. And the reason I kind of put this together was looking at the statistics. Obviously, we've just been through or going through, you know, a worldwide pandemic. And when you look at the statistics for osteoporosis, you know, 50% of women over the age of 50 have it, and 25% of men. So that is a worldwide epidemic. It's huge. You know, it's an enormous number when you think about what we're looking at the moment. And so you will have, even if you're not a teacher that specializes in, you know, special populations or rehab, you will have people in your class with it. There's just no way you're going to be get around that because it is so widespread. And there's various reasons for that, which we'll go through. But also we want to know what we can do, and you can rebuild bone density. It is definitely something that you can rebuild. It's something important to know to bank your bone density as well. You really want to be, you know, building up your bone density when you can, because later on in life, as you'll learn, it's harder to do that. In fact, it becomes difficult. So really, this is about giving you some tools, and you are welcome to use these slides with your clients. You know, if you wanted to do a little kind of osteoporosis week, I think it's coming up in October, you know, you could use these slides and talk to some of them, talk to your clients about it, you know, and get them in this way. I find it's a big lead of clients coming into me, because they know they can't do insanity, or, you know, they might be aware that there's certain things that they can't do, but they still want to exercise. We need them to exercise in order to improve bone density. So, you know, if you can specialize yourself as a, you know, bone builder, whatever you want to call it, if you can put that out there, you will definitely attract a lot of clients. It's a huge, huge market. Are you not, Claire? Can you not hear me? Yeah, where are you, Claire? Have you got your... Claire, I can only see Claire. Have you got me yet? I think the sound seems okay anywhere else. Maybe test your mic, and you can do that at the bottom. You know, with your little, where your mic is, you can test your speaker and microphone and just see if that's working. If not, if you need to log out and log in again, I'll let you back in when you go, Claire. Everybody else okay? Are we ready to crack on? As I say, do just pop questions down at the bottom in the chat button. I'm going to start my screen share. And let's see what we've got here. Great, guys. Lovely. Okay. So obviously, as I mentioned, there's sort of the precursor to it and why we do it. Can everybody see? I can't really see. Let me see if I can see you guys a little bit more. See, there we are. Lovely. Okay, great stuff. So I'll give you a little bit of the background of really why I was wanting to do it, because it's just such a massive topic, and you will be dealing with people in your classes with osteoporosis. In the UK, there's over 200,000 fractures every year, and that's a cost of over £1 billion to the NHS. So this is absolutely huge. It's a really worldwide epidemic. Up until 1994, it was thought to be a natural part of aging, and there is some loss of bone density as we age, but osteoporosis is going way beyond that, and it's not a natural part of aging. This is where the balance has got upset. So it was the World Health Organization coined the term osteoporosis only in 1994, so it's really quite a new understanding of it. It's kind of latest research that have gone into it. It's a systemic scalable disease. So systemic means it can affect any part of the body and the whole of the body, not just one part. And it affects all races, all ages, both sexes. And it's defined as, get the big words out of the way, a micro-architectural deterioration of bone, which makes it more susceptible to fracture. Okay. So bone formation happens, it starts when we're in the womb, so it starts as about 3 months as a fetus, and it ends, sort of the amount of bone you have ends sort of in your late adolescence, okay? So that will determine, you're not going to grow anymore after your late adolescence, which is, not good news for me, but when I got to 15, that was about it. My poor mother was the tallest in the class at 11 years old at 4'10", and then grew no more, bless her. So you've got what you've got when you get to late teens. And the process of laying down bone is called ossification or osteogenesis, okay? And it begins, as I say, in the fetus, ends in adolescence, and throughout your life, your bone is remodeling. It's not a static thing. So you've got bone formation and bone resorption, so that it's always being exchanged and new bone is building. And until we get to our peak bone mass, which is about the age 25 to 35, bone formation, all things being well, is outpacing bone resorption. So you get to your peak bone mass at that time. Osteoporosis occurs when bone loss occurs too quickly or the formation too slowly. So once we've got to our peak bone mass, we really want to be banking it then. After that, the fastest loss for women is the few years after menopause. That horrible M word, that's the fastest lost for women. Men still start to lose it after, more gradually. So they don't have that kind of, and that is all hormonally driven. We are just haunted by our hormones, aren't we? Let me just see, is there someone else in the changing room? No, we're okay. Lovely. Okay, guys. So for women, the fastest loss is in the years after menopause. And you're really looking at doing your best to keep your bone formation going until you get to that point, and really making sure the bone resorption isn't happening at a faster pace. Okay. Makes sense so far, guys? Lovely. So osteopenia, you might have heard that phrase, that's the precursor to osteoporosis. So with osteopenia, you've got about a 10 to 20% bone loss, and anything above 20% is called osteoporosis. And we'll talk a little bit later on about should you treat them the same. You will get different answers on this. I'll give you my opinion on it, and obviously you guys can make up your own mind. But there's, different, you will find different opinions on that, or whether they should be treated the same or not. Okay. So the facts about it, 50% of women and 12% of men will suffer a break after the age of 50. So you will suffer an osteoporosis related break after the age of 50 years old. The likelihood of a woman suffering a hip fracture is more than that of a risk of cancer and ovarian cancer combined. So it's a huge chance of that happening. Hip fractures, the sad thing about it is approximately 1 in 4 people will die in that year following the break, and twice as many men than women die after a hip fracture. And that's to do with immobility, it's to do often with infection, recovery. You know, older people struggle with that, they can't move around as much. So it's not a direct result of the hip fracture, but it's because of the complications that arise from it over the age of 50. So obviously everything we can do to reduce that risk is going to help benefit and prolong life. 25% of people who fracture the hip have to give up their homes for long-term care, which is always a really stressful thing. My parents are elderly at the minute, and my dad has just gone into a care home, and it's a difficult thing, and his to a hip fracture. But he has made it to the ripe old age of 92 before he did it, so he's not doing too bad. And osteoporosis can lead to long-term pain, deformity, disability, and of course death. So it's a major thing, and I don't know about you, but I say my parents are well into they're in the early 90s now, and I think that generation are made of cast iron. You know, they've been kept going till the sort of late 80s, and when I'm looking at the research that we're doing in this, and now looking at my children who are in their teens, it's quite a scary thought. So I think knowing this information as well, looking forward, is a really key point. How are we doing, guys? Any questions so far? Are we okay? Lovely. I will come back and answer them and look at them if I don't see them as we go. So unfortunately, women are more likely than men to develop it. And that is, as we'll talk about, due to hormones, good old hormones. You're far more likely if you have a family history, because there are some hereditary factors that cause that. So if you've got a family history of osteoporosis, and I've got to say, if anybody here doesn't have one or two of these risk factors, I will buy you a holiday to Barbados, because there are definitely, I definitely have some of these risk factors. You know, they're there for everybody. So if you've got a family history, your risk is higher. Body size. So if you are light framed, if you've never, you know, struggled with your weight, we hate you, and you are more at risk of osteoporosis. No, we don't really. You're more at risk of osteoporosis if you're light in frame and you've never kind of put much weight on. It does affect all races, but Caucasian and Asian women are the highest at risk. And also if you've had an early menopause. So estrogen and progesterone drive the production of osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are the cells that build bone, that go to the bones with the calcium and they build the bone. So if for any reason, and we know menopause is that, your estrogen and progesterone start to drop, you're not laying down bone as you did. Now this is where I should be a heap of jelly on the floor, because caffeine depletes your calcium. So for every 100 grams of caffeine, and that's about 2 or 3 cups of coffee, you lose 6 milligrams of calcium. It leaches calcium from the bones, and the same with carbonated drinks. So as I say, I should be a mess of jelly on the floor right now, but it's worth being aware. If you have anybody coming to you with osteopenia, they should really be looking at giving up the caffeine and certainly any fizzy drinks. If you've had a period of amenorrhea, athletic amenorrhea is quite common. So this is when you're younger and your periods stop because you are exercising so hard. It's usually associated with a very low body fat level. And that comes back to the hormones. The lack of estrogen, the lack of progesterone drives the osteoblasts to make new bone, and the same with eating disorders. There's also the issue eating disorders of not absorbing and not taking the calcium in when you need it. You know, sadly, it tends to affect younger girls when they're in that time where they want to be banking their bone mineral density and building that up. And the lack of calcium they're getting will mean they're more susceptible to osteoporosis. Okay, have we ticked any off yet? I've definitely ticked off the caffeine. So there are also diseases that can lead to that. So with hypertension, there is actually excess calcium in the urine. So they are leaching and calcium is coming out in the urine when you have hypertension, which can lead to osteoporosis. Hypogonadism is low testosterone. And for men, testosterone is a driver, just like estrogen and progesterone are for women, of building. So if you've got somebody with a low testosterone, they're more likely to have osteoporosis. Now, your hyperparathyroid gland is responsible for calcium secretion in the body. And if that's in balance, it's okay. But if you've got hyperparathyroidism, calcium is just being leached into the bloodstream constantly from the bones. And so that is obviously going to make osteoporosis a big risk for you. Inactive lifestyle. We'll talk later about why being active helps build bones and how that process happens. All the fun things, isn't it? Smoking and alcohol have a detrimental effect as well. So with alcohol, that actually drives your parathyroid, so that encourages the release of calcium into the bloodstream. And it also increases your cortisol levels. Now, cortisol is a hormone that is rife. When I do my women's wellness plans, we talk a lot about trying to get the cortisol down because it affects hormones, it affects the body dreadfully. But that also has an effect. Cortisol blocks absorption of calcium and it triggers resorption. It triggers the calcium being taken back into the body. And alcohol drives cortisol. So, as I say, all the fun things that can lead or add up as a risk factor towards that. With smoking, the liver releases more estrogen-destroying enzymes when you're a smoker. And with the less estrogen, we've got the less osteoblasts. So it's all kind of fitting together to mean that you've got this issue of low bone mineral density. And the depression and stress comes into the cortisol. Again, when you have high cortisol in the body, which is your stress hormone, it's one of the fight or flight hormones, that means that you have got this leaching and this trigger of the body releasing calcium and resorbing calcium. So really we need to go and lock ourselves away, I think, in a room, away from the pubs, and away from anybody smoking, basically. I'm sure you must have had some risk factors by now. So in 2004, the Surgeon General released a 400-page report on osteoporosis, and it was actually really sadly lacking in what exercise to do. There was lots of other good information, but it didn't really tell us much about what exercise to do, which is another reason why I kind of wanted to put this together. And he listed over 100 diseases that were predictive of osteoporosis. Now, that doesn't mean they cause it. It means there's a strong correlation. So if you have this, you are more likely to have it. Maybe not as a direct result, but indirectly. So if you've ticked off any of the other ones and you've got some of these, then your risk factors are getting higher. But as I say, don't worry, because we can rebuild bone density. So with haemophilia, obviously we know that's an issue. That 66% of haemophilia sufferers over the age of 50 have osteoporosis. They often have joint problems and a lack of vitamin D when they have haemophilia, because you need your red blood cells for that. So that's a really high risk if you've got haemophilia. They tend to be less active as well because of the joint problems. With AS, ankylosing spondylosis, and rheumatoid arthritis, those are both a form of arthritis, kind of a inflammatory arthritis, which means, again, less activity, but often it's the medication with those that are calcium leaching. So those are not a direct result necessarily, but it's the medication that they're on that can cause that. Same with inflammatory bowel disorder. The medication doesn't help, but again, it's that absorption of calcium, of being able to absorb and take on the food and the calcium from the food and digest that. With congestive heart failure, what they've found in people with congestive heart failure, when they've looked at them, 55% of them have multiple compression fractures. Which is a massive amount. And when you think about what they do when your heart fails, which is put two big defibrillators on you, the chance of your ribs smashing to pieces is not good at all. And that is often a reason why in elderly people they will not resuscitate, because they know if they put the defib on, their bones aren't going to take it. 55% will have had multiple compression fractures before their heart fails. So there's an indirect link to that, but definitely there's a correlation between the two. Lupus, again, is one down to it makes you more sedentary, and the medications, again, can cause that leaching of calcium. And there's more, as somebody used to say. So gastrointestinal disorders, Crohn's disease, colitis, again, that is back to not being able to absorb the calcium from the body, and also some of the medication you would take for that. And malabsorption, that is obviously being able to take all the nutrients from the food, and that is not going to build your bones. Hypercalciuria is an excess release of calcium in the urine. So it's just a condition some people have. As I say, some of this is hereditary, a lot of it is lifestyle, but there's many facets that come into this. And you should be on medication if you have that. But once they've discovered it, it may be that you're already in that osteopenia, osteoporosis point. Endocrine disorders, again, hormones drive your bone building. So if you've got any hormonal imbalances, and many people have now, a lot to do with the lifestyle we have, having estrogenic foods, etc. So all of these can drive that out of balance and cause osteoporosis. And osteogenesis imperfecta is unfortunately just a brittle bone disease. It's a hereditary disease that you're born with, that your bones just don't form properly. So they are, they're the in that bad luck group where they are born basically ready for osteoporosis. And the glucocorticoid use, those are the medicines used for any autoimmune disease, any inflammatory disease, but they are calcium leaching from the body. So that's just some of the diseases. I say there was over 100 listed, but there's an awful lot there that are correlated or give you a much higher risk of osteoporosis. Let's have a little bit of a look about the bones. So as I said right at the beginning, bone is always remodeling. It's not uniformly solid. It's like a matrix, and you can see there on the slide, there's a normal bone, which is much denser, and the bone with osteoporosis, it looks much more holy. You can see it's kind of more brittle, and it's made up of these sort of interwoven aspects, and they're remodeled all the time by the osteoblasts, rebuilding that bone. So there's calcium coming out and calcium coming in to remodel the bone. In real simple terms, you've got two types of bone. So you've got dense cortical bone, and you've got spongy cancellous bone, or sometimes you'll hear it called trabecular bone. So your dense cortical bone is what's holding us up. It's the structure, it's the strong stuff. And your cancellous bone is much softer, much more spongy, it's much more liable to fracture. And you kind of wonder, well, why have we got those two? That doesn't make sense. Why haven't we just got nice, strong, dense bones? And the reason is the cancellous bone is highly vascular, and that's what exchanges the calcium ions between the bloodstream and the bone. So without that, you couldn't have that remodeling. So we've got this cortical bone that's very strong, harder to break, and we've got the cancellous bone, which is much more susceptible to fracture. And this is where we need to be really aware as teachers, or if somebody that's got it, of where this cancellous, this more spongy bone is. And it's typically found at the end of long bones. It's at the end of the femur where your hip joint is. It's on the inside of your vertebra, so not the back of the spine, it's on the inside, so the front of your spine. And around the wrists as well, there is some cancellous bone. So your danger areas, often for people with osteoporosis, are the spine, the femur, the hip, and the wrists, because as they fall, the hand goes down and they often break their wrist there. So bear in mind where that cancellous bone is, and this will all kind of make sense to you as we go through. So compression fractures, they're likely to happen where you've got high cancellous bone. So we just mentioned there the hip fractures, but also the front wall of the spine. And if you see anybody who is very kyphotic, and just to explain, I know there's some people who aren't Pilates teachers on here, if their upper back is rounded, what we call a dowager's hump, that is highly likely, it's not a definite, it's highly likely they have had compression fractures. And remember, if the front wall of the spine is the delicate bit, that has collapsed down and they're in that rounded state with the upper back. So compression fractures, they're really common with osteoporosis, and it's when the weakened bone, it can't handle the sudden force anymore, and it can compress or break. Okay, if you get multiple compression fractures of your spine, you will lose height, so you will get smaller. Again, that's not just an old age thing, it's usually to do with multiple compression fractures that you will have lost height. The scary thing about this is that 2/3 of 700,000 spinal fractures that happen annually go undiagnosed because they're silent fractures. They will not feel any pain from it. Some of them are obviously painful, but a lot of compression fractures, they don't actually feel anything, they're silent, but they lead to long-term effects, diminished quality of life, decreased independence, deforms the spine into that kyphosis, and it increases your morbidity and your mortality. So your morbidity is your level of health and well-being goes down, and mortality, with the more compression fractures you have, the higher your mortality rate is, the more likely you are to pass away, unfortunately. So we need to know, and we need to be able to avoid these compression fractures as much as we can for clients. So how do you know if you have got osteoporosis? Well, the way to do it is to have a DEXA scan. And they only test the L1 to L4 bones in your spine for that. And that's because your lower, the L5, your sacrum, that triangle bit at the back of the spine is in the way, so they can't test that. And they can't test your thoracic spine, which is up at the back of the ribs here, because your ribs and sternum are in the way. So they only look at L1 to L4. Now we know those L4, those bones in your lower back are much larger, and they actually extend more. So extend means bending backwards more than they round forwards. Okay, and that makes them less susceptible to fracture. They haven't got as much movement to squash this softer bit of the bone at the front, if that makes sense. They're more used to extending back. So L1, L4 are larger, but those are the only ones they can test because that's all they can really see. And they will give you a T-score and a Z-score for that. Your T-score compares you to somebody at peak bone mass. So that's between the age of 25 and 35 years old. If you're above 1 standard deviation, you're normal, 1 or above. If you're -1 to 2.5 standard deviation, you've got mildly reduced bone mineral density compared with somebody of 25 to 35. And anything at or below 2.5 is defined as osteoporosis. A Z-score will compare you to somebody average of your age, but the T-score is what's really telling you if you have osteoporosis or not. So if you've got somebody, if you're somebody who has a lot of those risk factors, it would definitely be worth asking your doctor to have a DEXA scan, because we don't want to treat an idea, we want to treat an actual condition. If your spine is perfectly healthy, even with those risk factors, we want you to move in every way you can, because that keeps the spine healthy. So if you think you may have it, always worth getting a DEXA scan so you can treat the actual issue, not treat something that may or may not be there. So, should we treat osteopenia the same as osteoporosis? And you will get different answers on this. You will have people tell you different answers. I treat them the same, and I will tell you why. Normally you get a DEXA scan once a year, and the osteopenia could be progressing since that last scan. They don't test the thoracic spine. We just mentioned there in the DEXA scan, they just test your L1 to L4. Your thoracic spine is way more vulnerable to fracture. So if you have it in your L1 to L4, you can bet your bottom dollar you've got it further up the spine, and that's the bit that's more susceptible to compression fracture. Now, it's taking the whole person into account. So obviously if they said they had osteopenia, I'd be looking at that. But I would also ask them and check if they've had a loss in height. And often if you ask them, how tall are you? And then measure them, and if it's an inch or two lower, they will have been having some compression fractures. Up to you whether you want to tell them that or not. You might want to just say it looks like it's progressing. If they have that kyphosis, that rounded upper back, looking at that, then that's another indication they may be having compression fractures. So I'd be kind of looking at the whole person, but certainly if any of those were in there, I would absolutely be treating them as if they had osteoporosis, because we don't know what's happening in that thoracic spine, and we don't want to increase that risk of compression fractures. So what shouldn't we do? It leaves you this list thinking, well, what can I do? So contraindications, again, I'm going to explain them. I know Pilates teachers will know this, but I know there's some people who aren't Pilates teachers watching this. So forward flexion is rounding forward of the spine. And now you know that the bone at the front is softer and the bone at the back is harder. You can imagine if you are repeatedly flexing forward, you're putting compression on that softer bone at the front, and somebody with osteoporosis, that could cause a compression fracture. It's the same with excessive rotation, that movement of the vertebra round, hitting the bone at the front, and you could get some compression fractures of the spine there. So we want to look after the spine. We want to avoid bending forward. Another thing to avoid is strong rotational force through the hip. We don't tend to have that a lot in Pilates. If you think of, you will often get somebody who's older that says they've been kind of put with the weight on one leg in the kitchen and they've turned to get something and they've had a break. So it's that kind of foot on the floor and then forcing a rotation. Now, we don't really have many of those in Pilates, but we do want to just be careful of that hip bone. Poor posture, if they are constantly rounding forward anyway, that's that compression on the front of the spine. And excessive lateral flexion, so over to the side, again is going to put that compression at the front if it's excessive. Now, we don't want people to suddenly become a robot and not move, because your spine needs movement for health. So I'm hoping I show you in the exercise class that I do for you, welcome to join in or watch, that you can see that we can still move the spine. We still want to move the spine because that brings nourishment to the spine. That's how the discs get their food, basically. Up until 7 years old, they have a vascular supply. After 7 years old, they're completely kind of contained. And the only thing that brings the movement is the movement of the spine. That's the only thing that brings the nourishment. So we do want to move. So we basically are looking to protect those vulnerable areas, your hips, your spine, and your wrists, because often they will put the wrist down when they fall, and that's when they break. So bringing it back to a Pilates aspect, the things we want to avoid, anything really with a roll in it. A roll up, a roll down, a roll over, rolling like a ball, seal and boomerang, all those rolling actions. You've got force, you've got weight, loaded forward flexion, and that can massively increase the risk of your compression fractures. So curl-ups are the same. Anything with a rounded spine, the hundreds are going to be that, because you've got that kind of force through the arms. Spine twist, especially if you're doing the traditional kind of bouncing into spine twist. And so we've got flexion and rotation, which is a big no-no for osteoporosis. If any of you use equipment work, horseback on the barrel is really strong on the hips. So that may be quite a strong move for that. And that rotational force, if you do pigeon pose, if you know pigeon pose in yoga, that's going to be a real strong rotational force through the hip. So those are things that we definitely want to avoid. And for me, guys, I think mat work is the hardest thing to teach. You know, when you look at who you've got in front of, the skills you need as a mat work teacher, I can teach reformer and I can teach bar to a mixed group, and they would not know I was adopting up for osteoporosis. Because bar is a brilliant osteoporosis worker, as is reformer, and you can work the whole body without going into forward flexion and work them really hard. Mat work is much more difficult. And I think as teachers, we need to take a decision on how we teach. If you're teaching a classical class, you're going to have to take quite a lot out. So the class I'll show you, you will see some classical moves in there. but there will be more standing work and other bits going on there. So I do think mat is really, really tough to teach to osteoporosis, and you need a lot of skill to be able to either adapt or decide, you know what, I'm taking those things out and I'm putting things in to be safe. You could have, for example, if people were doing roll downs, you could have people doing bridges, you can do that, but it does make the class really quite difficult to teach there. So what can we do? What movements help? Well, there are two moves that Dr. Sherry Betts, who's an expert in this, calls the fountain of youth movements. And they are thoracic extension and hip extension. So by thoracic extension, I mean if you were laying on your front and you lifted your upper body, and if you're laying on your front and you lift your leg behind you, that's thoracic extension and hip extension. And she believes if you have good, strong movement in those two areas, you will have a protected spine for most of your life. So definitely in all your classes, I will be looking at putting some thoracic and hip extension. I will absolutely be doing that for you today. So those are movements to really focus on. Thoracic extension is excellent for osteoporosis. It helps protect the spine. We're taking the pressure off the cortical bone at the front. And with hip extension, we're building the glute muscle around the hip joint to protect it. With a bone, with a joint, you've only got three things. You've got the bone, you've got the ligaments, and you've got the muscle. And if the bone or the ligament are in any way compromised, which will happen as you get older, we need to build that muscle. And that is what will support the joints. So what can we do? We need to bone load and weight bear. And there is something called the piezoelectric effect. So the piezoelectric effect is actually a term that's used in engineering as well. When you put stress on a bone, there is actually the formation of electrical currents, electrical dipoles, and that attracts osteoblasts. It's like magic, isn't it? So the compression on the bone attracts osteoblasts to build. So bone loading and weight bearing is really, really important. And I would encourage you to maybe use some weights. I'm not going to use them today, but in some of the moves we do, I'll tell you which ones to do. Start incorporating some weights into that. We want to do extension for the reason we mentioned there. And we also want some small range rotation. Because if you've got somebody and you're training them here and then they look over the shoulder in the car, to park, we want them to have good movement, and we don't want them to be flexed doing that. We want them to be able to extend and rotate in kind of day-to-day movements. We want the thoracic extension first, and again, I'll go through that in the class. Now, plyometrics are flipping brilliant for osteoporosis, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But obviously, you want to be careful if they have pelvic floor issues. If they have stress incontinence when they are doing plyometrics, please stop, because things are going to start heading out south. We don't want that. So you may need to work with your clients on their pelvic floor first, and then introduce the jumping or the plyometric moves. Balance is the best thing you can do for wrists. Because we don't want them to fall. So balance work is really important, but I would always encourage them to do it near a wall. The last thing you want is somebody in your class with osteoporosis keeling over. So you want to give them another point of balance or the wall when you are doing balance work. And we also want to encourage lengthening, so that lift and lengthening to take the pressure off, to help stop that compression that's happening on the spine. So these are all movements that are really useful to build into every class you do, really, because we want to be banking it, but definitely if you have people with osteoporosis or osteopenia, they want to be doing this. And I've got to be honest with you, the one class that does all of this is bar Pilates. You're upright, you're working your glutes, you've got thoracic extension. It is a real, if you teach bar Pilates, you can absolutely sell that as a class for osteoporosis clients. And there is space next week if you want to try. Okay, so exercise. We need a plan now. We need a plan for it, and we're also going to do a class in a few minutes. So I'm not going to talk about diet today because that's a massive subject, but obviously diet is important to have that calcium in. But the one thing we can do as teachers and as maybe people with it is influence our exercise. And the Surgeon General says at least 30 minutes of physical activity, preferably daily. And that's a minimum that you're looking for. So it's not just 3 times a week. activity, and that could be walking, anything weight bearing, moving around, gardening. So, 30 minutes of good physical activity most days, preferably daily. Bone density increases directly with the amount of exercise you perform. So you're going to get better results the more you do. So going back to the jumping, the plyometrics, they found that they had two groups. One were jumping 20 times twice a day, and one group were doing 10 jumps twice a day. And you'd think they'd get kind of a 50% better result. They actually got a 75% better bone mineral density doing more. So the more you can get people on the feet moving, the better. And interesting, although running does help improve bone mineral density, jumping up and down on the spot was the best thing to do. So if you have clients who are okay with the pelvic floor, encourage them to start jumping. Now, I was thinking of rebounders, and I don't know if that's the same. If any of you teach in those, it might be interesting to know. The study was done with clients jumping up and down on the floor, but maybe rebounders might be a thing that help a little bit with that as well. Your doctor will prescribe medication, improving your lifestyle, looking at those things we talked about, the smoking, the caffeine, the alcohol, and improving your posture are all going to help. And you can absolutely improve your bone mineral density. Doing all of these, you can get at least a 50% improvement. Exercise alone can get a 15 to 20% improvement, but combine that with medication and all those other things, and you absolutely can improve it. So it's not a lost cause. It really isn't a lost cause. It's something that we can definitely improve. So I'm going to stop sharing my screens now. Let's see, have I got, yeah, I'm still at class at 11, and then I'll go to 5'2", and yes, I'm feeling your pain. Oh, let me see, I've got some that have not come back in. Sorry guys, are you all back in? Sorry about that. Lovely. Did I miss the, oh yes, I did, thank you, Rona. Bilateral oophorectomy, I did miss that out. Rona said, did you miss out the fourth one on the list, bilateral oophorectomy, if that's the right way you pronounce it. So that is when your ovaries are removed. And that is down to, again, the estrogen, no estrogen not being provided, and the estrogen drives your osteoblasts. So that will, if you've had your ovaries removed, that will drive your risk of osteoporosis. Yes, you will get the PowerPoint slides should be on the presentation I send you, but I can send you those as well if you want. Maybe guys, if you just email me if you want those, and I'll send you the PowerPoint slides as well, because you're welcome to use those, as I say, if you want to. Okay, any other question guys on the chat? Anything else you want to know there? It's kind of, once you understand where I think the cortical bone is, it makes sense, doesn't it? Kind of where the risk factors and the compression fractures are, and what to avoid. Okay, so what I will do, if you're all right, we will start a class. So this class is designed to build bone density, but also avoid the risk factors, so the risky moves. We're not going to be doing any lateral forward flexion or extreme rotation, etc., etc. But there is going to be Pilates in there. It's about improving posture. Oh, is it site specific? I have no idea. Oh, what is osteoporosis site specific, Emma? It can, yeah, somebody said, is it site specific? Is that, sorry, can you unmute for a second? Maybe I've muted you all. I don't know whether you're talking about the PowerPoint slides or the osteoporosis. Osteoporosis isn't, it affects all the body. Site-specific, no idea with PowerPoint, no idea. With the jump board and the Reformer Health, absolutely would help with that, Deb. Yeah, Reformer, again, is brilliant because you've got bone loading and you've got springs for tension. The Reformer, again, is a fantastic osteoporosis exercise. Oh, sorry, Peter, Rona's your daughter's name. Oh, well, Rona's welcome as well. Training the site. Oh, training the site. I see. So is it site specific if you train the site? Does it get stronger in that area?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of jumping, that will do the whole kind of spine and hips. With terms of thoracic extension, that is more protecting the spine and the hips. It's more giving protection to the joints, but it's more your upright stuff that will help this piezoelectric effect. Yeah, so you want to be getting up. That's why bar's brilliant, because you stood up for half the class. You've got the weight of gravity through the spine. So those things will increase bone density. The things like thoracic extension, hip extension, are more protection of the joints rather than giving you a lot of bone density, if that makes sense, because it's the stress on the bone, sort of the compression on the bone, that gives the effect of the osteoblast coming in to rebuild. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Wonderful. So are we ready for a class? Good. Okay. So I'm going to switch. Oh, am I going to switch screens up here? Let me see if I can. Will that come on if I do that? Give me a second, guys. Oh, have I lost you? Where have you gone? Where are you? There you are. Right. I'm going to see if I can swap my screen. This is where Kenny said earlier, he set all this up for me today. He says, do you want me to stay? I went, no, I'll be fine. I'll be absolutely fine. Has that changed my screen? Let me bring myself off. Oh, there we are. I think we're there. Let me see. If I stand back, can you get... Oh, marvellous. Is that the right screen? You can see my... Yeah, you can see me there, guys? That okay? Fabulous. I'm going to put a little bit of music on then. You are welcome to join in, or of course you can just watch this for reference. I've got a few props with me which you absolutely don't need. I don't think I'm on the right screen yet. Hang on. Let me make sure I've got that right. You should have stayed, Kenny. Where are you? I want full webcam. That's what I want. Yes, there we are. Marvellous. So I've got a few props which you don't need, but they're worth getting. I've got a pole to hit, not to hit people with. I've got a pole. I've got a little block or a cushion, and I have got a soft ball. But you can also use a couple of bath towels. So big bath towels. If you roll them up and have them as a roll, you can use those as well. And I'll show you a little bit later in the class what that's about. Okay, guys. Let me see if I can. Right, can everybody still all hear me? Are we all okay? Fabulous. Alrighty. So we're going to stand with the feet hip width apart. I want you to lengthen up through the crown of the head and just give your shoulders a little bit of circle round. So we start to open out the chest, open out the shoulders as you circle there. Lovely. A couple more circling the shoulders round, and then we're just going to reach the hands down the side of the legs, because that helps just glide the shoulder blades in a little bit. Good, and feel that length through the crown of the head. I'm going to bring the hands to the crease at the top of the leg, and I'm going to do a little squat back. So I want the hips to move, the knees to follow and come up. So guys, you probably know all about squatting, but what's really useful for people with osteoporosis is to use the pole and place the pole. I have got my, let me try and move my mic back out of the way a little bit there so you can see. So I've got the pole on the back of my head, in between the shoulder blades. My thumb is just there, just kind of, if you can see it, just between the poles. So there's a little curve in the lower back, and then it's on the back of the hips. And I'm going to try and squat and keep those 3 points on there. So this is actually really useful for me as well, because what I like to do is increase the curve in the back rather than keep that neutral alignment. So for somebody with osteoporosis, especially if they're kyphotic, they're going to really struggle. They're going to want to round the shoulders forward. And it may be their head at first really doesn't even touch the pole, but it's a great way of coaching people to come into a squat. So I would definitely encourage use of the pole. If you've got one or a broomstick, whatever you can manage to get that squat action going. So we're going to do a few more squats here, and I would encourage, once their technique is really good, for them to use weight. And you don't have to buy expensive weights. You could get a couple of carrier bags and put bags of flour in them to build up the weight. Just have them holding close, so we're getting that piezoelectric effect and the weight through the bone joints there. Lovely. So then what you want to see is if they take their feet wider and squat, and I would use the pole on this, can they squat and touch the floor? Or when they do that, does their back collapse? If that happens, you want them to coach them not to pick anything heavy up from the floor. And what's quite nice is getting something like a basket or something with handles a little bit higher up that you can start to coach them. If their technique is right, start picking things up from the floor, but they need that ability to be able to get down there, but really encourage them not to do that if they're finding their back is rounding, because that's encouraging those compression fractures. So it's nice to do them a bit narrower, and then do the wide ones to see if they've got that mobility in the hips. So let's have a couple more here. Good. Last one. And then coming tall. Nice. So we're going to think of squat, one leg forward, one leg back with the heel up, and you want to be wide enough for balance. I want you to think of keeping the spine tall to start with as you squat down and come up. We're going to do two versions of this. So again, you could have that pole on the back, good, to feel this work. And mobility of the hip is really important. Mobility of the hip means the back can stay still, it's not compromised. And encourage this lengthening up. And then I'd like you to think squat again. I want you to send your hips back. So this is actually a really functional move. This may be where it's easier for them to pick something up from the floor with that straight back, with the hips hinging back. Here you're getting much more work through the glute and hamstring. And guys, just a note, if you're encouraging them to use weights, it's a really good idea for them to wear trainers. We don't want anything dropping on the foot and breaking the foot. So one more like this, lovely. And then changing over. So other leg forward. Make sure you're wide enough for balance at first. Keep the body upright. The knee pretty much stays where it is as you drop down and come up. And you're encouraging that tall spine, always thinking about good posture and getting the weight of gravity through the legs. So standing work's so important. Good, you could do different sequences. You could do squats and these split squats. And then you want to encourage that weight moving back. So we're getting much more work when you do that through the glute and the hamstring on this side as your hips press back. And again, you may be able to encourage that picking up from the floor that way, as long as the spine doesn't collapse forward at that point. So it takes quite a bit of coaching to get people to keep their shoulders down in that position. You'll have to keep reminding them of that. Let's have one more here, and then standing tall. Lovely. Now we're going to focus on balance, because balance is the best thing you can do. Again, I would do quite a lot more of that with clients initially. We're going to step one foot directly in front of the other as if you were on a tightrope, and you'll feel your ankles wobble about a bit there. You can use your arms for balance. Good. I'm going to bring the arms up in front. Keep the body facing forward. Pull back with the elbow and come forward here. And again, with your clients who have osteoporosis, you probably want them to be near a wall so that they can just pop the fingertips out there if they need to. So feet will wobble around. You'll feel that balance work. Good. Squeezing, so we're feeling the shoulder blade pull back. One more this side. And then changing sides. So we've got the feet, that tandem stance, one foot directly in front of the other. You often find one way is easier than the other. Bring the arms up in front, shoulders down, pull elbow back on one side, lovely, and then squeeze back on this side. So you'll feel a little bit of a wobble around the ankles, that's the proprioception kicking in, good. And again, loads of balance work is really good for helping that vestibular system. Reaction to balance work. One more here. Good. And then bringing the feet to hip width apart. Hands on the hips. Keep the pelvis level. Lift one heel. See how it feels to balance on one foot. Lower down. Good. Trying to keep the pelvis fairly level as you do that. Focusing on that balance and the abs pulling in. And we can add an extra challenge with that. Either closing the eyes, which takes away your vision, which makes this part of your system of balance. But again, make sure they're near a wall if they're doing that. Or you can add in the head turning. So they hold, head turns to the side, comes center, and lower down, and other way. So lifting. Let the head turn, that vestibular system kicking in. Come center. That's really wobbly for me on this mat. Quite a thick mat. Honestly, it's the mat, it's not me. Leg comes up, turn the head. Good. Come center. And other side. So if you do suffer from osteoporosis, also have something nearby to balance. Lovely. Coming center. Fabulous. Give your shoulders a circle round here. So standing work. Is somebody coming in? Let me let somebody back in. Sorry guys, I'll just let Anne back in there. Okay. So balance work, standing work, building up the weights. I would do probably quite a long section, or bar would be fantastic for that because you're upright so long. We're going to come to sit on the mat, and I'm going to show you how we can really still work the core without doing curl-ups or hundreds, all that kind of stuff here. So I'm going to sit with the knees bent. I'm going to take the hands out wide, and I'm going to lean back into that. I'm opening the chest and the shoulders. So this for me is almost quite a stretch through the upper body. I'm going to engage the abs, fold one leg in, place it down. So I want to feel the abs are contracting to lift that leg up. So I'm getting this feeling of pulling in through the lower abs because we want support from the spine, from the core. So that fold in, lovely. And I'm going to take you through a few levels here. So we're building it up because you may have some very fit, strong people with osteoporosis who want to feel this work. This is level 1. Level 2, we float one leg off, second leg comes up to join it. Can they maintain that, or have they lost their core? Upper body open, abs holding. One leg extends, so we've got single leg stretch. I'm working pretty hard into the core now. You could of course do this with one foot down, do it that way. But for now, or toe taps, I'm pulling in, I'm lifting. My abs are working super hard. I'm checking there's nothing in the lower back. I haven't collapsed or arched there. That's working hard. Upper body open. As many of these as you want. I'll do 2 more. Reach away. Lovely. Last one. Feet come down. We're just going to give that a little release. My upper body stays lifted and open. I'm going to let the knees move to the side a little bit. So I'm getting some gentle rotation, but through the lower back. It's not excessive. I'm keeping the upper body open. And we're just getting some nice movement through that lower back gently. Abs are still pulling in. And of course, anytime, give your wrist a little bit of a rest. And then coming back into that open position, lifting the chest. This is the tough one if you want to try it. One foot comes in, second leg comes in. One leg lengthens. I'm going to lift and lower that leg. I'm keeping open in the upper body. My legs are working, the abs are working super hard. I've got this knee pulling into the chest a little bit. 2 more, this leg. Bending that knee in, and other leg lengthens away. That lift and lower on this side. So there's a lot of work going on here in the core. I'm still opening the upper body, getting that lift and lower. Fabulous. 4 if you can. This is hard. Keep that knee pulling in. 3. Who says we can't work hard with osteoporosis? 1 more. Place the feet down, open the chest. And obviously you would build that up with your clients. They may not be able to do all of that straight away, but you've got some weeks and weeks to work on with that. Let's have just a little bit of rotation again, knees together, chest open. Let that lower back relax. And in fact, that's a fabulous one for most people that come to classes with, they've been sat at a desk all day. Really opens out the upper body. Excellent. Well done, guys. So we're coming on to all 4s. Weight bearing on the wrists is really good. There's not really many contraindications for wrists in Pilates. You want to encourage their elbows to face each other. For me, I often want to hyperextend into that. So I've got the hands a little bit wider than the shoulders, and the crease of my elbows is rotated in. Shoulders are down. So I'm going to keep the same distance between my chest and the floor as my hand and foot slide away. So I'm maintaining that. You could definitely use your pole at this point on the back to make sure the back isn't moving or arching. And I'm keeping length out through the crown of the head and out through the tailbone as I do that. So our progression is to slide and then lift, controlling down. So we've got that diagonal connection across the back. Watch for people with kyphosis that they're not here. Encourage the shoulders to slide down and we've got that weight bearing through the arms. So we've got a couple of levels here you can work with. Coming down, take the hands a little bit wider. Abs are in, and I'm just going to shift the weight forward a little bit and push back up. So this is a good one for not allowing all this hunching up around the shoulders. If you send the weight forward rather than down, it just encourages the shoulders to stay down as you do that. So the weight is through the arms, good. You could, of course, build this up to a half press-up position or even a full press-up position if you are feeling frisky. Let's have 2 more here. 1 more like this. And then hands forward, just easy flat back as you sit back over the heels. So encourage some lengthening here. Wriggle the arms forward, take a breath in. And then back onto all fours. So I'm giving you quite a lot in one go. You would obviously break these down if you needed to. From here, we're going to take one leg out. Keep the same distance with the body and the floor as the other leg comes out. Bring that down. And really encourage that positioning of the shoulders. Shoulders down, away from the ears. Maintaining the body. So watching kyphosis, that they don't suddenly drop the back here. We're staying strong through that center. And you can build up this from here to holding. And if you like, a small tap out to the side. So small tap with the leg. So again, people who have not exercised in a while, this will take them a while to build up to. But absolutely great for people through the bone loading, through the arms. 2 more here. Good. And then sitting back over the heels, let that all relax. Let the neck relax, wriggle the arms forward. Lovely. So a bit more core work now. So as I say, the core work and the back work are supporting the joints. Anything where you're pushing the weight through the feet is going to give you a bit more bone loading. So to come on your side, you can either slide the hands out and come down with a flat back, or you can come onto your side and roll onto your back to avoid that forward flexion. So shoulders away from the ears, abs are going to pull in. You're going to let the ribs relax down. Somebody with kyphosis may well need support under the head now. They may need a pillow here so their head isn't looking back in that position. So we've got our core engagement, 1 foot floating off the mat. And we could stay with just leg lifts, focusing on that pull in for beginners. If they can maintain tabletop, we bring 1 foot in and the second leg comes into that tabletop position. Arms are going to reach up just towards the legs. Drop the shoulders into the sockets. Opposite arm and leg moves away where we can maintain that hip-rib connection. So watch for the back wanting to lift. Keep that hold with the core as you reach away. So the abs are bracing or holding. We're checking the abs aren't rounding out and doming. We want the deep abdominals to do the work as opposite arm and leg move away from that center line. Love. Give me 4 of these, working that endurance of the core. The shoulders relaxing down to help the posture. And 2 more here. Lovely. Last one. Nice. Knees hug in towards the chest gently. Check at this point they don't come into that forward flexion, just to release for the lower back. Bring the hands onto one knee. Single leg, stretch the leg. And alternate. So we're keeping the head down or supported by a pillow if you need it. Because the head's down, the leg wants to go more on that reach to, if you imagine sort of the ceiling and the wall meet, rather than down here where the back will lift. They will actually feel their abs much more in that higher position than if the leg were lower down. Reach 2 more here. Good. Last one. And then 1 foot down and the second leg down. So if you had a pillow behind your head, you would move that out of the way now. Shoulders away from the ears, heels in close. We're going to peel the spine off into bridge, and you're making sure the weight just comes onto the shoulder blades, kind of bottom of the shoulder blades, not into the neck. And then you're going to roll the spine back down again. So this is gentle flexion, it's not loaded. You're working on getting length in the spine. You're decompressing and lengthening. Remember, we do want some movement. And from the upper back, rolling down. So your check is to make sure the weight doesn't go too high. And you're peeling off, feeling length through the spine to bring that lubrication to the joints. And then rolling down again. Now we're going to bring a bit more movement to the lower back now. So we're going to lift up into bridge. Good. Make sure the weight's just on the shoulders. Just let one hip drop down. Push on that side. Other hip drops down. Lift. And then control the lower. So the upper body is not getting involved in that flexion at all. The weight's just on the shoulders. I've still got a nice gap between the chin and the chest. Drop one hip. Push into that heel to lift it, push, and then roll down. So we're working the glutes definitely, and we're getting some gentle movements through the lower back. Good, little drop, and lift. Great, rolling down. Relax there for a moment. So we've mobilized a little bit. Because we've mobilized, we're going to do some strength work now. Peel off, hold at the top. Check the hip doesn't drop. We lift one foot off, place it down. Check the hips stay level as the other foot lifts. Place down, and then roll the spine down. So we're working into the hips. We're getting the work there around the glutes. Press the weight down through your heels on this one. You'll often see people wanting to bypass the glutes working and the heel lifting. Keep that strong push down through the heels. So bone loading definitely through the legs on this one, and rolling down. Good. So let's do 2 more of these. Get that length away. To make it harder, arms in the air. You want to make sure you're not dropping, but you've then not got any help from the upper body to help with that move. Lovely. One more time. That peel off. Lengthen out, get as much length as you can, weight just on the shoulders, lovely. Push into the heel to lift, and rolling all the way down. Wonderful. So coming to lay on your side, you can absolutely use a pillow or a block underneath the arm. And we're going to start off just with the bottom leg bent and the top leg reaching out long. We're going to flex the foot, push through the heel. We're going to do a little kick forward and then a point, reach back, squeezing into the glute. So we're working again, strengthening into the hip here, flex forward, point, reach back. I want the abs to hold, so the distance between your ribs and the pelvis stays the same. And again, this is a hip mobilization exercise as well. We want good hip mobility, so the back doesn't have to overwork or move or compensate for that. So we've got that kick forward, reach back long. Good, let's have one more, flex forward. Good, reach back, hold that leg then level, just a small circle. We don't really want a big circle and put pressure on the hip, just a small circle with length. Keep really reaching through this side so we feel the decompression through the whole spine. And it feels like your bottom waist is pulling off the mat that you're that long. Circles round the other way as you reach and lengthen. Feel this lovely stretch and length through the waist as you reach long. And then releasing down, bending the knees. Coming up onto the elbow, slide the shoulder down. And option 1 is just to feel that you lift the waist away. So we're just sliding the shoulders, a bit of shoulder stability as you lift. The knees move back, we can build up to a side bridge. So again, this isn't excessive lateral flexion, but we're getting the strength through the side of the body as you lift and control down. If the neck feels tight, you can always look down at the mat doing that as you lift and control the lower. So slide the shoulder lift. You could of course do this on the hand as well for some bone loading through the wrists if you felt they have the strength or you have the strength for that. Let's do one more. lower down. And then I would get a block or a cushion underneath the head. Bring the arms forward. I just want this hand to reach up and back on a diagonal. I'm not coming into a lot of rotation. Reaching back, and my head is just going to look towards that. Fine to have a pillow here. So we're getting a little bit of extension and rotation, but we're not going into excessive rotation. Bring that forward, and let's do those on the other side. So your body is in one nice long straight line. Again, lowering down carefully, reaching the legs away. Bend the bottom leg a little bit for balance if you want to. Lengthen through this side. Feel the waist pull off the mat. You're flexing forward and reaching back. Keep this same distance. It's quite nice to have the thumb on the rib and the little finger on the hip. And you want to focus on the squeeze back. We can easily bring the leg forward. Often again with people with kyphosis, the hip flexors affect the muscles down the front of the quad shorten. So we want that length, but we want the hold with the abs as you reach back. Working in the hip and working for length. Remember your spine, the vertebrae aren't actually held together. They've only got ligament around them. They're not joined together as joints. There's discs in between. So we can absolutely work on that length as we reach. Couple more, flexing forward, point, reach back, lengthen there. Good, one more. And then we'll hold the leg, tiny circles round. So think length, think reach, rather than big circles of the hip. Good, reaching and lengthening, abs holding that lovely long line to stretch away. Upper body relaxed or just in front for balance. Circles the other way. Always thinking length rather than height, getting that beautiful reach through the side of the body as you lengthen. For 3, great, 2, and then relaxing down, bend the knees, coming onto the elbow. Elbow directly underneath the shoulder, slide the shoulder, lift the waist is option 1. And you can just feel the muscles down the side of the body contract as you do that. Fine to have the eyes looking down towards the floor, and you can progress to that lift and control down. So slide the shoulder, lift, good. Control the lower. Often takes a while just to work on this shoulder placement first and the waist lifting up. So there's a very slight lateral flexion, bit of work to open up the ribs to the side. Couple more here. Lovely, lifting. And you could hold these for much longer if you wanted to. Last one here. Great. Lowering down. By all means, grab a pillow for under the head. Arms forward, knees bent, arm reaches up on the diagonal, so it's just the upper back. We've not let the lower back twist. Eyes can look towards that hand. Remember, they are going to be moving around. You're going to have to move around with this. We don't want to get people just stuck in one position. Take a breath into that. Lovely. And coming forward. So coming up to sitting. So often I do what we call passive thoracic extension in the class at this point. Obviously you won't have your props with you, so I'm just going to show you quickly. And you can use a ball, or you could use those rolled up towels. So you need kind of 2 fairly big bath towels. Fold them over, roll them up so they're in a tube. And you would get the ball just onto the back. So again, you want to keep the back flat as you lower down onto it. And it's kind of just kind of between my shoulder blades here. I'm going to make a cradle with my hands so the head is completely supported. I'm going to keep the ribs down. So I'm going to extend back over the ball. And you can move from that neutral position where you might actually just feel a little bit of abs and extending back. My ribs want to do that. That's what wants to happen. But then I'm not really getting lower back. I'm not getting thoracic. So I'm keeping the ribs down as I extend back there. So it's really the upper back. So I am using a bit of core here to stop the ribs lifting up. And you can spend a minute, a couple of minutes there if you like. And then you're going to work it further up. So I'm kind of at the top. Again, my ribs stay down, but I'm working now a bit higher up through the spine and getting that lovely extension that we need. So this is helping the kyphosis. It's helping that compression from poor posture from the front of the spine, and it's getting that upper back extending. And this is passive, what we call passive extension. I'm not having to use muscles, I'm just using gravity. So again, spend a couple of minutes there, and then I would come right up so it's resting on the neck. At this point I could nod off, but I promise I won't. So I've got the head on. All I'm going to do is push the back of the head gently into the ball. I'm not nodding, I'm just pushing back gently. So this is the very top of the spine. So the neck, which you know you've seen that forward head posture, we're just getting a little bit of release there and a bit of lengthening. And again, you can spend even a few minutes on doing that with either the rolled up towels or with the ball. A roller tends to be a little bit hard. You want something a bit softer for that. So you've got a little push and release. And then rolling onto the side to come up. So even that little bit feels fantastic, but I would definitely spend longer doing that. And you don't want to finish with that because you've just opened everything up. Now you want to strengthen in that position. Now, if you do have somebody with osteoporosis, it's really worth having a cushion or a pad for their ribs when they're laying down. So if they have got it, you just want that pad or cushion underneath the ribs. I would definitely encourage that. And I'm going to go through 3 stages of thoracic extension for you now. The first one, you're going to have one hand on top of the other, and your forehead is relaxing down on here. So forehead relaxing down. I'm going to slide the shoulders down and just lift the head. And what I really want clients to think about, or you to think about, is your armpits trying to press down into the mat. So I'm focusing a little bit like I was with the neck, with the ball on the neck, just the top few vertebrae. And this is the first stage. The second stage is to be able to hold that, lift one arm off without dropping down. Lower, change hands over. So you're going to lift, hold it. Lift the arm without the spine dropping. Obviously, if you drop, you want to just focus on strengthening that movement first. And then you progress to the hold, lifting both arms off without a drop in height. So this is working the top few vertebrae of the spine. So you've got first the lift, then the single arms, then both arms. We're going to move it down a little bit further by bringing the hands at the side of the head. So I'm going to slide down, come up a little bit more, exactly the same. Can I lift one arm without losing height? Really sliding and pressing the armpits down to the mat and lowering down. So hands aside of the head now. Really watch that they're getting extension in the top of the spine. It's not the lower back quite yet. And again, you will progress to lifting, holding. Can they maintain that width? They lift both arms off, or do they collapse at that point? So cue the shoulders down, cue the armpits down to get that nice extension. And if those are both good, you can bring the elbows in by the side, coming up a little bit higher into the lower back as well. But checking they're not rounded up at this point. You're really working the shoulders down. And exactly the same process. Arms lifting first. Can they maintain it? If not, go back to just the slide down. If they can, try both arms lifted. So you're getting that wonderful extension. So there's a lot of work you can go there through with your clients to get that movement and extension in the spine. I would definitely work single leg kicks here. So shoulders down. Once they've got that lovely extension, the abs are pulling off the mat. I'm going to pull the heel in and release down. So you'd want to work on thoracic extension first. You don't want them here in this movement. Feel the abs are pulling in. And this is giving a nice release to rectus femoris that runs down the front of the quad. In a kyphotic posture, it's often pulling the pelvis forward and down because their upper back has collapsed as well. So the abs are pulling in, you're lengthening. You've got this wonderful work through the back of the body as you pull the heel in lovely. And you can do some of these as you pull in and then laying back down. And it's great to finish with some glute work. So legs lifting, controlling down. You can do straight leg lifts, or you can absolutely do bent leg, keeping the hip pressed into the floor, single leg, or even both legs to get that hip extension. You're checking that when they're laying down, the abs are pulling in, but they're not lifting the hips away. Pelvis is flat at the front. And bringing the arms out in front, thumbs up position with the hands. Opposite arm and leg. Check that they're moving from the thoracic again. They're not hunching up. Shoulders are down in that beautiful flowing opposite arm and leg action there. So whenever you've done any passive thoracic extension, any laying back, you've got the movement there, and then you want to finish with the strength move. So let's bring the weight back, a little stretch back over the heels. Let that soften, but again, watch we have flexed forward, back is flat and lengthening. Taking a nice breath in. Lovely, so bringing the weight up flat back. You want to encourage them to come to standing through bent legs. So hands on one knee, coming up with that flat bar rather than rolling back up. And again, you might finish off with just a few little squats to encourage that position, maybe using the pole or not. So guys, I hope that class was useful. Let me just swap back to my other screen if I can find it. Where's my mouse gone? There we go. FaceTime. Lovely. Fabulous. Have I got the right one on here? Yes. Right, let me find. Where are we now? Can I put my gallery view? There we are. Why aren't you down here? Do I have to drag you down here? You can tell how good I am with technology, can't you? I think I'll leave you up there. I think I'll leave you up down here. So guys, has that helped? Has that been useful? Yeah? Brilliant. Good stuff, guys. Lovely. So what I will do, feel free to, let me see, great. Thank you, Cara. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Oh, sorry, Louise hasn't got back in. Is anybody else back in, or have they all gone now? I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, yeah, I hope that's all. Everybody's going to get the recording anyway, so hopefully they will see that. It's just some nice alternatives, and really, you know, you decide whether you're going to adapt for your class, which is hard. It's really hard when you're teaching that, much easier with reformer or bar, or whether you keep some of the classical stuff in, but just look at how it works for you. So guys, hope that's been useful. It's really good for me if you don't mind if you put something on Facebook about it. It does help other people, encourage them to come along. So if you enjoyed it, please write something about it. If you didn't, don't. Kidding. Yeah, if you put something on there, that's fabulous. Let me know what you thought of it, and obviously I will send that through. I'll probably edit it either this afternoon or tomorrow. I'll just cut out the bit at the beginning where I'm staring, looking gormless at the screen for 5 minutes, working if I've got everything right, and I will send that through to you. So you've got that as a recording to keep. But anything else you want, guys, if there's any other subjects that you're interested in, let me know, and I will definitely put something together for you. And thank you so much for spending your Friday, lunchtime, afternoon, whatever, with me. And as I say, any questions, let me know. Thanks for joining me, guys. Lovely to see you, and I'll see you again soon.